We're barely halfway into the second season of X-Men 97, and I can already say this with some confidence, that this season will be one of the best ever in the entire X-Men universe. I mean, the first 3 episodes did set the tone perfectly, and the 4th episode comes with some devastating twists, and an uncertain future for the X-Men as they find themselves back in their original timeline during the 90s. I think it's safe to say that the Ancient Egypt timeline has been the most intriguing one so far, as the likes of Xavier, Magneto, Nightcrawler, Rogue, and Beast try to tame young En Sabah Nur and prevent him from becoming Apocalypse. The entire 4th episode is focused around this arc, but you'd be mistaken if you think it's all about En Sabah Nur here. It's also quietly setting up Rama-Tut, who is a warlord from the future who's come to conquer the past before becoming the dreaded Kang the Conqueror. It's one of the most defining moments in the episode. En Sabah Nur takes control of the shapeship and embraces his Apocalypse self while attacking Rama-Tut and his city. Rama-Tut decides to leave, but it's the presence of an unnamed woman beside him that has created quite the stir, as he hints at her external identity. So, who is this mysterious woman, and what makes me think she'll have a big role to play in X-Men 97 lore? In this video, you'll find all the answers.
That flying vessel, it's Nur!
Is the mystery woman Candra? Who is she, and what is her relevance here? Well, it hasn't been laid out for us, and the makers have purposefully kept her identity a mystery for the viewers. However, the fans have deduced that she might be Candra, and I think that the fans are onto something here. I mean, the identification does fit in perfectly with her comic book history, and we are talking about Candra the External here. She's an immortal, but nothing is known about her past or origins, except her own claim, where she says that nearly a millennia ago, a mortal gained possession of an external heart, and it cost her dearly. When the other externals formed the High Lords, Candra refused to join them, and since she feared a repercussion to her decision, she planned to extract her life energy of her immortal heart into a stone. In the comics, even En Sabah Nur was a fellow external, and he helped her in the process, but of course, that's not something that the X-Men 97 narrative takes into account. Candra later developed a pact with the New Orleans Assassins and Thieves Guilds, where she provided them with great power so that they could protect her from her immortal brethren. She would get monetary tribute as a ritual called tithing, and X-Men the Animated Series explores this in one episode, which I'll come back to later in the video. There are some very interesting comic book story arcs featuring Candra, and one of my favorites is the one where Aurora Monroe, aka Storm, stole her heart gem. She also has a couple of interactions with Gambit, such as the time in Spain where a 15-year-old Remy LeBeau breaks into her home and she recognizes him from when his future self interacted with her in the past. She gave Remy and his cousin to the Pig, who was a mutant crime boss and slaver who dealt in human trafficking. In another timeline, she also had a brief fling with Gambit, and a lot of her stories actually relate her with Gambit in some way. This is why the Rama-Tut connection surprised me in the show. In fact, we even have a story arc where she's associated with the Egyptian Guild of Thieves, and you can see how it's referenced through her presence in ancient Egypt in X-Men 97. How powerful is Candra, and how can she be a match for Apocalypse? We've already seen that even before transforming into Apocalypse, En Sabah Nur is powerful enough to defeat the X-Men single-handedly. Rama-Tut avoids direct confrontation with Apocalypse, but he has a strange, wry smile as he leaves Candra behind to face him, so there must be something about her that makes her a fitting opponent. Well, as it turns out, she's definitely capable of being a force to reckon with. She's a near-immortal mutant who happens to be a high-level telekinetic. Candra possesses vast molecular-level control over energy and genetics, and as an external, the only way to kill her is by physically destroying her heart. She relies on absorbing the life force of the dying to regenerate her body, and her other powers include certain mystical and psionic talents. She also has a powerful regenerative healing factor, and this means that she can recover from near-fatal injuries. Surely this all bodes together as a worthy opponent for Apocalypse, if the story intends to use her in this context. So how does she fit into the narrative? I think one of the greatest assets of X-Men 97 is the incredible writing that ensures that the story stands out. The presence of Candra at this crucial juncture is a classic example of that. So when Rama-Tut sees Apocalypse's ship approaching, he realizes that it's pointless for him to stay and fight. He leaves his advisor Candra to fend for herself and face Apocalypse while cryptically telling her that her destiny starts today. In the words of Rama-Tut, this power can only be challenged by a force that is external. And I would say that's a really smart way of putting things into perspective. Of course, Candra is confused about this riddle because it's a reference to her future in the comic book narrative and the original X-Men the Animated Series. She doesn't know it yet, but her role is significant going ahead. If you go by the narrative of the original X-Men Animated Series, Candra becomes an external in the present-day 90s and rules the Thieves and Assassins Guilds, which Gambit was also a member of once. This is slightly different from the comic book storyline where Candra and En Sabah Nur are both part of a subspecies known as Eternals, which comprise of mutants possessing immortality and the ability to regenerate and come back to life. The only real threat for an external is another external, which makes perfect sense when you realize why Rama-Tut thinks that she can be the one to stop Apocalypse. Will this be used as a potential tool to fight Apocalypse, as the X-Men have been clueless about stopping him so far? Well, we'll have to wait and find out, and I'm sure that Candra has a much bigger role to play in the entire Apocalypse saga. The 90s cartoon connection. So I just told you that Candra appears in the original X-Men the Animated Series, and in this segment I'll take you further into the story. This was an episode focused around Gambit titled Externally Yours, and she was called an External, shown as a black-haired woman who served as a benefactor to both the Thieves and Assassins guilds, with both guilds paying her tribute for her power. In the episode, a danger room exercise goes out of control after Gambit accidentally turns up the difficulty to maximum. Meanwhile, he finds out that his brother Bobby has disappeared, and he was apparently supposed to bring a tribute to the External. Gambit has to head back home, and he has a flashback of a time when he had to deliver the tribute to the External, and he was almost too late. Later, when we see the External appearing, she collects the tithe from the Assassins and gives them strength and protection. The Thieves are punished for being late. It's a story where the X-Men get caught up with the Thieves Guild and the Assassins Guild in their effort to rescue Gambit, and later they face off against the External as well. Finally, Jean Grey uses her telepathic abilities to show the External that she has been duped, and she takes it out on the Assassins who had sabotaged the tithe. It might be a simple story featuring her, but it's enough to understand the extent of her powers. I think it's an incredibly smart move to place someone like Candra in the court of Rama-Tut in ancient Egypt, and maybe this will focus on her origin story in great detail. It's a deliberate and layered callback that should keep the fans interested to see more of her in the coming episodes. The Kang Rama-Tut connection, the bridge between this version and the MCU counterpart. The presence of Pharaoh Rama-Tut is no accident, and I would say that the character has been perfectly placed into the narrative. I've realized that the X-Men 97 representation of the character leans into the MCU version of Kang more than the comic book version. There was never any doubt in my mind about who Rama-Tut really was, but I can understand why he might have been confusing for those who are only familiar with the MCU. Well, the fourth episode puts every confusion to rest because Rama-Tut finally reveals himself when Xavier demands to know who he is. He says that he has so many names: Kang, Victor, Nathaniel, and finding oneself can be so confusing. This is the sinister warlord from the future who has time traveled to the past to conquer Egypt. And toward the end of the episode, you even see him putting on the iconic purple mask of Kang the Conqueror as he returns to the future. I find this even more interesting because this is a clever nod to a storyline that MCU had abandoned. Before all the hype about the upcoming Avengers Doomsday with Dr. Doom as the big bad, the plan was to have Kang the Conqueror as an Avengers villain. This film would have been titled Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, and the preparation for this began as early as the first season of Loki. When Loki and Sylvie meet the founder of the TVA, He Who Remains, they're told about how the TVA was created to stop a multiversal war that could take place as variants of himself started traveling across realities, and not all of them were benevolent. In the film Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Kang the Conqueror is shown as one of the cruel variants as he attempts to escape the quantum realm and expand his rule, but Ant-Man and his allies stop him. The post-credit scene shows the Council of Cross-Time Kangs planning a counterattack led by Immortus, Sinurion, and Rama-Tut. However, the actor playing the role, Jonathan Majors, found himself in some controversy and he was dropped from his contract with Disney. The Vision eventually changed and Dr. Doom replaced him, but X-Men 97 is here to remind you all over again just how invincible and inevitable Kang the Conqueror can be. I love how the show hints toward the MCU version of the character, with images like the hieroglyphics around his throne that He Who Remains used to explain his backstory in Loki. There's even the He Who Remains symbol on the wall of his fortress. Well, at least we're going to see him as a major villain in the animated series, if not in the live-action universe. Why this matters for X-Men 97's bigger picture. The writing for this show is pure genius, and I'm all for the idea to put Candra in Rama-Tut's court because it weaves three separate mythologies into one connected web. For instance, you have a clear reference into the origin story of Apocalypse as En Sabah Nur transforms into the dreaded villain in this timeline. Kang's time-traveling version Rama-Tut is already in the mix of things, and Candra by his side makes sense when you realize that the makers might actually be using this opportunity to explore her journey to become an external. Let's not forget that Gambit's external-tied comic backstory is also quite significant here because his sacrifice in Season 1 already carries a lot of emotional weight. Overall, it's safe to say that Candra is here to stay, and this is not just a random cameo to give you a fun throwback into the comic book narrative. We still have 5 episodes to go in the second season, and from the looks of it, I think we're in for some of the most unforgettable story arcs in the X-Men universe. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the presence of Candra in the mix of things and her potential role going ahead. Also, don't forget to share your views on the eventful 4th episode that ended with a major character death. If you appreciate the efforts to bring you this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more such videos.